From the Eagle's spotless record as the best wrestler the UFC's ever known, to Jon Jones's career highs as the best MMA artist in the promotion, let's nominate the best UFC fighters by style. Of course, we're starting this list off with the greatest lightweight champion the UFC has ever seen, Khabib Nurmagomedov, aka the Eagle. In 2019, Forbes named Khabib the greatest Russian athlete ever. Makes sense considering his spotless 29-0 record and his reign as the longest UFC lightweight champion in history. Khabib entered the UFC with a pretty interesting backstory. He'd wrestled a bear when he was 9. His father, a decorated athlete and war veteran, made sure that Khabib honed his skills at an early age. The Eagle started wrestling at the age of 8, and he hasn't looked back since. He started his UFC career in 2011 debuting against Kamal Shaloris. He won that fight via submission in the 3rd round. Gleison Tibau, Thiago Tavares, and Abel Trujillo were no match for the Dagestani. After his 2013 win against Pat Healy, UFC President Dana White told the press that Khabib reminded him of a young Matt Hughes. The Dagestani's been called submission-proof. He holds the record for the most takedowns in UFC history, 21 against Abel at UFC 160. The only fighter who'd ever come close to Khabib's record was Sean Shirk, and no fighter has come close ever since. Khabib was certainly the underdog going into the fight. It was one of the first of his career, and Trujillo was a decorated wrestler. He was a 4-time NAIA All-American and was believed to be one of the best grapplers in the UFC at the time, which made the sight of Khabib tossing Abel around all the more surprising. The commentators went ahead and claimed that Khabib was tossing his opponent around like a rag doll. Altogether, the Dagestani attempted 28 takedowns, of which 21 were successful. Trujillo put up a great fight too. The octagon looked like a bloodbath, but in the end, the judges awarded the Dagestani a 30-27 win via unanimous decision. His first loss came in 2018 when he lost the 4th of 5 rounds to Conor McGregor in a title defense match at UFC 229. Khabib vs. McGregor was a highly anticipated event, with UFC 229 marking McGregor's return to the UFC after his boxing stint against Floyd Mayweather. He lost, by the way. UFC 229 has gone down in history as one of the most viewed UFC events. It became the most viewed event of all time in Khabib's home base, Russia. There was a lot of controversy going into the fight, with McGregor swearing up and down that he'd win no matter what. The Irishman's strategy going into the fight was obvious: don't allow Khabib to grapple. It worked for a minute, but then, within the first round, Khabib managed to score his first takedown and bring McGregor to the canvas. The bell rang and McGregor was expected to make a comeback in round 2. Well, he didn't. The next round started with a strong right hook that disoriented McGregor for most of the fight. Again, Khabib took him down in seconds and won round 2, just the same. Viewers got their money's worth when they saw McGregor tap out, and Khabib celebrated by throwing his mouthpiece at the Irishman's corner, jumping the octagon, and hurling punches left and right at McGregor's team. UFC 254 marked his retirement. Khabib announced that he'd promised his mother that he wouldn't continue without his late father by his side. The Eagle faced Justin Gaethje at UFC 254, winning and earning the Performance of the Night bonus, marking the end of the greatest UFC champion in history's career. So, let's ask Khabib himself for this next category: the greatest striker in UFC history. The Dagestani named his top 15 UFC fighters of all time, and at number 3 was none other than Anderson Silva. And we agree. The former UFC middleweight champion holds the record for the longest title reign in UFC, 2,547 days to be exact. He was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame in 2023, with Dana White claiming that Silva might just be one of the greatest fighters he's ever seen. His best performance might arguably be his debut. The Brazilian fighter signed with the UFC in 2006 and was immediately scheduled to fight Chris Leben for his debut match. Everyone was confident in Leben's victory, even the fighter himself. He reportedly claimed that he'd knock out the relatively unknown Silva in the first round. His announcement made Silva's victory so much more satisfying. The Brazilian won the fight for only 49 seconds in the first round after landing a flurry of punches against his opponent and taking it home with a knee kick. Silva's striking accuracy was an astonishing 85. The UFC capitalized on his newfound fame as the underdog with a lot to offer and announced a poll on their main page. They wanted fans to select his next opponent. The majority believed that Silva should go head-to-head against Rich Franklin, the champion with a near-spotless record, at UFC 64. To everyone's surprise, Silva won, and that kick-started his career as the longest-reigning UFC champ. What made Silva's fights all the more interesting was that almost none of his opponents made it through the second round. At UFC 97 Jiu-Jitsu black belt, Thales Leites became the only fighter in UFC history who managed to fight Silva for a full 5 rounds. He still lost, though. While Silva lost to Israel Adesanya, also regarded as one of the best strikers in the UFC, at UFC 234, fans still believe Silva's striking is unmatched. On to the next category, the greatest jiu-jitsu athlete in the UFC. Unsurprisingly, Charles Oliveira takes the title home. Former UFC lightweight champion, Do Bronx, has several records to his name. Most submissions win at 16, most finish at 20, and most bonuses at 19. An interesting fact about Oliveira is that he became Sao Paulo's jiu-jitsu champion only 2 months into training to become an athlete for the sport. He was also only 12 when he won his first jiu-jitsu championship. Oliveira had several jiu-jitsu wins when he debuted in the UFC in 2010. He was named the hottest Brazilian prospect. His first fight against Darren Elkins ended with a submission win for Oliveira, 41 seconds into the first round. One of the most memorable wins of his career came against Nick Lentz the second time around. Lentz and Oliveira had first gone head-to-head in 2011, but the fight was declared no contest after the state board realized Oliveira had won via an illegal knee kick. Lentz and Oliveira then faced each other again at UFC Fight Night 67, co-headlining the event with Thiago Alves and Carlos Condit. The fight was one of the best jiu-jitsu displays of Oliveira's career. Lentz himself was a well-trained wrestler and had won several fights because of his intense grappling. It was a phenomenal fight that ended with a third-round victory via guillotine submission for Oliveira. The two would face each other again in 2019, where Oliveira dominated and won via a technical knockout in the second round. At UFC 144, Oliveira faced David Tamir in what many believed was a dirty fight. The Swedish boxer irked Oliveira and his camp with several eye pokes and illegal punches, but Oliveira ultimately won via submission. UFC 170 against Kevin Lee, UFC 274 against Justin Gaethje, and UFC 269 against Dustin Poirier are some of the best submission wins in UFC history. As far as the best MMA fighter in the UFC is concerned, Jon Jones has this one in the bag. The current UFC heavyweight champion is in every fighter's top 3 as one of the best fighters the world has ever seen. Jones became the youngest title holder in UFC history at 23 when he defeated Mauricio Rua. Interestingly, Jones's only career loss was against Matt Hamill, which even Hamill disputes. Jones also holds several titles, such as the longest title defense, most wins, and longest winning streak. Jones's greatest win to date came against the equally talented Dustin Cormier at UFC 182. Dustin had transitioned to the heavyweight division and remained undefeated going into the fight. There was a lot of trash talk back and forth heading into the fight, which made UFC 182 one of the most viewed events in the promotion's history. Still, despite a phenomenal display by Dustin, it was Jones's win for the taking. He managed to score 3 takedowns and ultimately win via unanimous decision. Jones's longest career rivalry was with Alexander Gustafsson, main event on the UFC 232 card in 2018. His third-round takedown earned Jones the Performance of the Night award and the title of the UFC light heavyweight champion. He's held the light heavyweight championship multiple times, defending it against elite fighters. Jones's skill set includes striking, grappling, and wrestling, making him adaptable in any bout. His record against top competition, along with mental toughness, physical prowess, and championship reigns, solidifies his status as one of MMA's greatest fighters. With a record of 26 wins and 1 loss, a highly disputed one at that, no one's questioning Jones's skills. So, from Jon Jones's career highs as the best MMA artist in the promotion to the Eagles' spotless record as the best wrestler the UFC's ever known, those were the best UFC fighters by style,